I'm Karen Bosick with Iron Sun Valley. I'm sitting out here with a flower that I cannot remember the name of. I expect you're like me. Every spring you gotta learn the names of the flowers, don't you? Fortunately, I have Lisa Horton here with me. She's one of the valuable members of the Idaho Native Plant Society, the Wood River Valley chapter. So I suspect I can get her to tell me and you what this flower is. What about it, Lisa?
Well, Karen, this is one that a lot of people just look at and think, oh, it's just a weed. Well, weed. What does that mean? To me, it's a very lovely wildflower. It's called Yarrow. One of the reasons I like it is because I like the floral arrangement and these lovely little flat white flowers and these fuzzy leaves that have a million little leaflets. Oh, wow. So this is a clue to the species name, which is Achillea millefolium. And millefolium means 1,000 leaflets, right?
Ooh. And it's so soft.
Yeah, it's very soft. And the other part of the name, the Achillea, comes from Achilles, who supposedly used this plant to bind the wounds of his injured soldiers during the Trojan War. And I've actually used this myself when I fell down when I was hiking and skinned my knee up really bad. Oh, no. And I took the leaves and I packed them in the wound and tied a wet bandana around it, and it clotted. It's really good for clotting and antiseptic properties.
Wow. Now, Lisa, this is a plant that a lot of people confuse thinking it's arrowleaf balsam root, but it's not.
Well, there are two big showy yellow flowers this time of year, and it's not too hard to tell them apart. And since you know there are only two and the sunflowers don't bloom until later in the summer, you got a pretty good 50-50 chance here of getting this right. So this is yellow Wyathia, or yellow mule's ear. And it has something in common with arrowleaf balsam root, which is, you know, about the same size, has the big showy yellow flowers, although they're a little paler than these are. But the arrowleaf balsam root has a leaf that's actually shaped like an arrowhead, and it's softly furry and kind of grayish green. Whereas this gets its name from the fact that the leaves are actually the size and shape of a mule's ear. So that's where it gets its name. They're really shiny as opposed to the gray, soft finish on the arrowleaf balsam root leaves. So that should be enough to distinguish them. The mule's ear grows straight out of the ground. I don't know if you can see this, but see how there's hardly even a little stem there? And it's actually native to Idaho and the surrounding states. It's not a really widely distributed flower. It has a big taproot, and so it can grow in places like this, in this meadow that probably had standing meltwater from snow for a period of time, but now it's really hard and dry.
I usually see it in areas that are moist in the spring.
So the mule's ear, as well as the arrowleaf balsam root, are in the sunflower family. They have strong stems. And if you take the flower apart, you'll see this is actually a composite flower head. It's not one flower, it's a whole lot of flowers stuck together. So on the outside are these flowers, little tubes with one great big petal, like a big ear, and in the middle are just little tubes. So that's why we call this a composite flower. You know, there's also a white one of these. So there's a white mule's ear, and you'll see it in similar situations. There's a big patch along Phantom Hill, somewhere up in there. And sometimes...
And there's a lot near Stanley Lake.
Yes, yes. And sometimes if you see them both in the same place, like you do on the back of Dollar, they will hybridize.
Oh, they will.
And then you get a creamy yellow flower instead of
That's
a dark
interesting.
yellow one and a white one, which is pretty cool. This is chokecherry, and it is in the rose family. And if you think about it, there's so many plants that our lives are intimately involved with from the rose family. Of course, there's the rose,
Right.
you know, which are beautiful. But apples and cherries are two examples of very important commercial crops that are in this family. And like those, chokecherry has a very classic flower, 5 petals and multiple stamens in the middle. So the stamen is where the pollen is. And flowers have a great sense of multiplication tables. So you will always find if there are 5 petals, the other parts will either be 5 or 10 or 20 or something like that. If there are 3, then there'll be 3 or 6 or 12. It's always multiples of the of a particular number, and that's a very important species characteristic. So in the rose family, you've got 5 petals and lots of stamens. So this flat saucer kind of shaped flower in these cones. This is diagnostic for the chokecherry. And when these flowers are pollinated and they set the fruit, you will have the same basic shape, but of dark red to almost black berries.
Right.
So I know you've been hiking in the late summer, and when the birds just go crazy for the chokecherries, well, you know, people go.
My dog does
Yeah,
too.
really. People go crazy for the chokecherries too, and they make either jelly or chokecherry syrup by pressing the flesh off the pit. So the pulp of the berry is actually the only part of this whole plant that's not poisonous, extremely poisonous.
Really? Wow.
So if you're going to eat the chokecherries and swallow the pits, you just hope they go all the way through in one piece.
Okay, I'll remember that.
Because they're cyanide.
Ooh.
And cyanide's pretty nasty poison. So, you know, the chokecherry, the berries, though, have been used, the Native Americans used them extensively.
Did they put them in pemmican?
Pemmican, yes. But they also pressed them in cakes.
Cakes.
And dried, you know, just like a dried
Yeah.
blob. And they stored them and then put them in stews and things in the winter.
Oh, okay.
So one other I think really interesting thing about chokecherry that you can always look at it's common to cherry trees in general, are these little raised scars on the bark. These are called lenticels.
Almost like pimples.
Yes, but they're little pores with raised margins, and they help with gas exchange into the inner tissues. But it's something you can always look for.
Now, Lisa, I've always thought of this flower as a trumpet flower or a star flower because of the 5 petals emanating out like a star. Tell me about this one.
Well, that's a really good identification characteristic, Karen. This is scarlet gilia, and it's in the phlox family. And phlox family characteristic is 5 petals that are united. So this thin part here, this is where the petals are all stuck together along their edges. And then they release and fold back and make the trumpet part. So we have a couple of course we have phlox in the garden at home, but there are a couple of wild phloxes that are very common here in the Wood River Valley. Small and pale pink, but the red, you gotta love this color, right?
I know.
So when you see a red flower this time of year, you're pretty darn sure that this is scarlet gilia, right? There's only one other red one I can think of right now, and that is a red penstemon that's actually blooming on Timmerman Hill on the road cut, and blooms in the summer on Galena, on the far side of Galena in the road cut. But those are planted from seed mixes from the highway department, and they are not native here.
Now I often confuse this one with syringa.
Well, Karen, lots of people do, and I've done the same thing. I think you know, because it's our state flower, we want to see syringa. But the fact is, syringa is very uncommon.
Really?
You're very unlikely to run into it. And you're more likely to see it in someone's yard as a horticultural variety. This is Serviceberry. It's in the rose family, another important shrub for wildlife that's in the rose family. Also called Juneberry, Saskatoon, and in northern Arkansas, where I'm from, we call it Serviceberry.
Oh.
Yeah, Serviceberry. Yeah. It's got your typical rose flowers. It's got 5 petals and lots of stamens in the middle. I don't know if you remember what I said about flowers and their multiplication tables. Well, it's got 5 of these, and there will be some multiple of 5 stamens in the center. It's also got an interesting leaf. It looks just smooth, like the edges, but in reality, the back half is smooth and the front half has little bitty teeth, which is kind of cool. Yeah.
Kind of bites me.
Yeah. So the fruit of the Serviceberry is like a little blue apple, which the rose family, remember the apple is in the rose family.
That is so strange.
And so they look, that's the shape. And they don't have a lot of taste. But they were an important food source for our Native Americans. Lewis and Clark wrote in 1806 that there were Native American tribes along the Lolo Trail who made cakes of dried serviceberries as big as 15 pounds. Can you even think how many serviceberries that must have been?
I wonder how they
Squished them together. I have no idea. A lot of wildlife depend on serviceberry. Bears, squirrels, birds eat the fruit, and deer and elk browse on the foliage part. So, you know,
well, that's good because we have a lot of it around.
We have a lot of it around, and it can be as probably it gets grazed down. You know, it can be this size up to about 15 feet, and that's in the central part of the Rockies. It can be 30 feet tall other places.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow, that's huge.
Yeah.